Hey, Ev.
Hey, K-Man, how's it going?
All right.
Nice.
It's been a while.
A real long time.
What has been? It's been over a month.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I guess there'll be a lot to talk about, possibly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's start off by the current situation here. So, we're at this time, the protests have been still going on, but they're kind of died down. But I think Portland is still kind of going off in the States, that is.
Yep.
COVID-19 is in its resurgence everywhere in the world.
Yep.
So we're seeing further shutdowns and rises of pandemics and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. government is now coming out and releasing more and more information on their encounters with UFOs. So UFOs are no longer a crazy fringe thing. It's on CNN now, in the New York Times. What else? Transformers Battle for Cybertron has been released on Netflix.
What's that? That's amazing.
Oh, you don't know what that is? That's a whole other podcast, my friend. But there is some depth there because, Optimus Prime holds the Matrix, and the Matrix is the place in which all Autobots are one. So, yeah, is what I tell myself when I watch it. So, yeah, there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on in the world. So that to be said, that there's always things going to be happening. There's always things going to be going on.
Yeah.
It's just very intense right now. And the thing that makes this one different is that it's a global kind of pressure. Everyone's going through the same type of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Around the world. And I want to say in the first world.
Yep.
In the third world and war-torn countries, stuff has still been messed up, and it's been messed up for a long time. I don't know. I don't even want to think about what Syria is going through right now on top of all this.
Yeah.
Right. And places that are already seeing a lot of conflict and war, and how much stuff is getting swept under the rug now that the attention, the spotlight is on other things. So I know there's people suffering around the world, and I just want to just say that, as much as we're going through in our first world comfortable nations, right? Imagine what they're going through in places that were already rife with human suffering and human rights violations to begin with.
Yeah, you could see in in India, you knew India was going to be quite bad, considering the population density and, the level of poverty in the country. And now they're starting to hit some really insane levels in terms of infection rate. And, you don't hear too much about actually what's happening in those areas of poverty, but you can assume that it's really bad considering, the United States being the economic powerhouse of the world is struggling to, stop people from dying and of course have the highest death rate in the world. So these countries are going to fare much, much worse if it does get worse for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I'm just saying that to keep in mind that a Tibetan, I can't remember who it was, whether it was like Padmasambhava or Rinpoche or one of the Tibetan masters, but he's quoted as saying is, for those who have leisure, right, not to put it to waste.
Mm.
So basically, if you're in a life where you have leisure, then spend your time pursuing your self-realization, because that's really the purpose you've been given leisure in life for, basically. And what I mean by that is not that people can't pursue self-realization in all kinds of situations, but to kind of start from like a starting point where you're starting out on the spiritual journey is, apart from those who start it because some kind of trauma or strong imperative, it's a thing you do because you have leisure time. You have the time to sit down and go, you know what? I'm going to take up meditation. Or, you know what? I'm going to start yoga. Or, it's a thing of leisure.
Mm.
And so since you've been given this time for leisure, use it for your own spiritual growth, so to speak, is the meaning behind what he was saying. And so I think a lot of us in first world nations, right, even those of us who are, well, I don't have a big house, or, It doesn't matter. We're all in a certain high percentage with quality of life wise compared to the rest of the world. So we have leisure as much as we, I'm not going to compare myself to the, .com millionaire that, has 5 cars and, lives in a mansion somewhere. I'm saying me living a normal middle class life, right? Have a lot of leisure time and a lot of things that other people in third world countries just don't have, right? Running water, hot and cold water, time to watch TV, right? Time to take a vacation once a year or whatever, you know what I mean? Like these are just things that are not on the table for a lot of people around the world. So,
and it's interesting you say that because you see that sort of the countries that have sort of the highest rate of mental illness or growing rates of mental illness are, developed countries where there is, a surplus of leisure, where if they sort of don't fill their time, let's say, right, because they haven't developed the techniques to be introspective, then their mind may start going off on tangents and they start to follow them, and then it becomes an issue because they're no longer having to just survive, right? So they have so much time to think and, become heavily identified with the thought patterns that come up.
Yes, my mother would always say, the devil finds work for idle hands.
Yeah, that's it. It also reminded me, when you're talking about Tibetan master, I was reading a Tibetan book. I can't remember if it was a Tibetan book of living and dying, but it was one of them. And there was this master who, was imprisoned for years. And of course, he took that time to, meditate every day, and he had a routine, and, he was fed. And as long as sort of his needs were taken care of, he had all this ample time to meditate. And then when it came time for him to be released, he's like, I actually don't really want to. You know what I mean? So he actually found that although he was locked up, he was able to find a sense of freedom in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that kind of describes my my experience during the lockdown, the original lockdown, where I was just confined to your house, really, with no work, right? And it's much more, let's say, it was much more decadent than living in a prison and living in your own home.
Yeah.
But all I had to do was just sit in my place all day. So I was like, okay, I'll get up and I guess I'll meditate, and then I'll clean up, and then I guess I'll meditate again, right? And I'll do some exercise, and then I'll meditate again. And I guess I'll look about getting something to eat, and then I'll meditate again, right? So there's all this ample time, right, to do so. And then having to go back out and work now, right? I could feel myself being pulled away from the state of mind before the state of mind you're in when you want to meditate. And this is a practical point, right? There's like the state of mind before you actually are going to say, okay, now I'm going to meditate. There's like a pre-state of mind before that. And sometimes to get to that state of mind, you don't have that chance in a day when you're really busy. But then there comes a point on some days where it feels very natural. Like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to meditate in about 10 minutes. And you're in that state of mind where you're like, I'm looking forward, or I need to, or I want to, or it's very easy to go, okay, I'm going to sit down and meditate. That's a state of mind like before your meditation. And some people can't get there when they're too busy, And so during the lockdown, I could get there quite easily because I didn't really have to shift away from there in order to perform any tasks. And that brings up a point, I guess, from the last podcast where if we're being mindful and we're listening to our self-talk and how we're speaking to ourselves, I didn't have to, let's say, call upon any egos or any voices in my mind that I use to get through the day when I'm doing my job or interacting with colleagues and stepping out into the world, so to speak. When I'm at home, it's very simple. Cook, clean, exercise, meditate. And so the conversation never had to leave those places within my own mind, right? So it's very easy to just slip into the premeditative, into the meditative mindset. And then having to step back out into the workforce, I find myself having to kind of like, oh, no, let's bring it back there. There's much more willpower involved in bringing myself back to that point.
Yeah.
Which, is great because noticing the difference while being mindful also highlight certain things that, the individual expression can work on in order to become more in tune with the only. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's, basically where I am at the moment. So, if you've been listening to our podcast, you've known that I had a child about 3 months ago. And so since then, I've, been extremely busy with that. And of course, running a business now that things are sort of calming down here. And so I haven't been able to sit and meditate on a regular basis like I was previously. And that does have an impact on sort of my overall well-being and sort of how I interact with people throughout the day and the level of attentiveness towards my thought patterns, my emotional state, and whatnot. However, in saying that, it's not like I actually haven't had the time to sit and meditate. It's just that after being so busy, like you said, you have to be sort of have the mental state in order to jump into meditation. And so in my free time, I haven't really been doing that. I've just been, watching TV or playing video games. And so I have to sort of at this point redevelop that discipline to, resist the urge to sort of compulsively play video games or sit in front of the TV. So to get that sort of sense of, okay, all right, now it's time to sit, or go to bed early so that I can actually wake up early to sit and meditate, because it makes a big difference in my life. And despite the fact that I know what I am, you do need to have a certain level of practice and discipline in order to allow that to express through your daily life. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you brought up a couple of interesting things there. Was there has to be like a cool down period a lot of times. I was just speaking to you about this earlier, where you come home from work and your brain is and your mind is going at a certain speed, and then to switch over to meditation, you almost need like a cool down, a decompression, right? Whether it's, I'm going to sit down and just, have a drink for a second, or I'm going to just watch a meaningless, easy to watch, mindless TV show for a second, or, get a couple games in on a video game or something, right? Just to decompress. And then what happens is, though, you'll find your decompression takes over and you end up just doing that.
Yeah.
The second thing I would say is that, it's almost like the mind will reveal to you, the ego will reveal itself to you through its wanton avoidance of meditation. Because I'll say, like, if you really want to know how much your ego doesn't want you to meditate, right? When it's time to meditate, give your ego the option of like that, or let's say finally cleaning out your closet. Your ego will say, I want to clean out my closet, right? Or give yourself the option of, I'm going to meditate or hit the gym because I've been meaning to hit the gym. Your ego will go, I want to hit the gym. It'll do the thing that you didn't want to do, but that'll put that next to meditation, and it'll say, yep, I'm choosing that.
Yeah.
Right? So the ego reveals its nature in, play that game with yourself if you want a couple times, where you can say, okay, I'm going to sit and meditate, or, right, I can do that thing that I've been putting off and procrastinating about. And all of a sudden, right, the procrastination goes out the window and say, yeah, let's do that. You're fully on board now, right? Because your other option is sitting down and doing absolutely nothing, right? And the ego will find, and the mind will find any way possible not to be still and silent, right? When it knows that's what it's coming to. It's kind of like a child avoiding a spanking, or a child avoiding taking their medicine or taking a bath, right? When they're young, they'll find every opportunity to do something else. So
yeah.
And then learn to go, okay, and be, I say gently compassionate, almost humoristically. Where I'm like, oh, look at that. I'd rather, take out the garbage from the night before when I don't need to than sit and meditate. And that's, that should be a big indicator that meditation is what you should be doing. Also, for those going through the same thing, I find that this is where prayer and mantra and some kind of spiritual practice come into play and are very useful. So I find that, I don't feel like sitting down and meditating, or you sit down and you're like, I can't be still. Say a few mantras. Mantras focus your mind and get you into the state where you can now sit and relax and be in complete meditation with no mantras necessary. A prayer is the same way, right? Sit down and pray and get your mind aligned with your relative goal of meditation. So prayers, mantras, spiritual practices, like a Kundalini, inward Kundalini meditation, anything like that helps you align, some kind of action, whether it's with your voice, even doing some yoga poses, right, is a great way to kind of calm yourself down. So there's many things that you have available to you that are pointing you in the right direction. So, because if you're doing something like a video game or watching a television show or something else, it can lead to more and more further, motion in the mind, where if the thing you're doing has as its purpose the moving towards meditation, then it's kind of like, hitting two birds with one stone. So you can kind of go, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to kind of get my mind on board because it wants to do something. But this is also going to bring me into the mindset that I'll need in order to move into meditation. And that's where I find mantras and prayer help me out a lot. Or even listening to something spiritual, right? You could even use this podcast for those of you listening, right? To kind of move you into a meditation. And if it can be of that service, then all the better. Are you slipping into that mind state over there, Ev? Or?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So, discussing all the stuff we were talking about before, all the distractions and all of the things happening in the world and happening in our own personal lives, being able to kind of cut through it all and move immediately into a meditative mind state. Right? So I don't have to decompress. So I don't have to say a mantra. I don't have to do I don't have to jump through all these hoops just to get to the point where I can meditate. That should be kind of like the goal, where I can go, as soon as I need to meditate, I'm in meditation, no matter where I am. Because meditation isn't like an action, it's a state of mind. And it's a state of your mind when it's aware of itself as it is in its own nature. So there's a few things you could say to yourself to kind of get yourself there that I use as kind of like not shortcuts, but like triggers. And then it puts me immediately where I need to be. And this will be different for everyone. So you can find those things. And they'll arise when you're on your spiritual meditation journey. I find that's what like Zen koans are very good for. And Satori's, where it's like a realization that you have. Anytime you have a realization that makes you go, aha, yeah, write it down, because you'll be able to use it later to kind of go remind yourself of where it is or what your highest point of understanding or truth is up till that point. And it'll be something that you wrote down, that came from yourself. So it's going to resonate with you much quicker than someone else's words. So that's one point of advice I would give. The second thing is that remaining mindful throughout your day, making the effort to remain mindful, keeps you in that meditative mind state. Because really mindfulness is kind of like, you could say, the dynamic part of meditation. So I'm going to get up and keep meditating. And basically that's just being mindful to a certain degree. So that when I am still, I'm just right back into meditation when I can sit down, right? So there's the still meditation and there's the moving meditation. And so on the topic of remaining mindful throughout the day, this is something that arose when I was speaking to a family member. And they were talking about trying to remain in an awareness of God and to remember, Jesus in their heart. So they're obviously from a Christian background. But they said that, something happens, they get triggered, and all of a sudden they're, back to their old self, so to speak, and, being very judgmental, harsh in their words, agitated and angry in their demeanor. And then the moment will pass and they'll be like, oh, it happened again. And so they kind of were discussing with me and asking me about, well, what happens when things pop up like this and I just lose myself in the moment? Not in a good way. And so I would say to anyone listening that's going through this, which is, I think, most people, part of becoming mindful and listening to your thoughts and what you're saying to yourself and the images that are appearing and the conversations that are going on inside yourself and becoming aware of them and much more attentive to them so that nothing slips past you, so that you're aware of the whole thing. Nothing is subconsciously happening anymore. You're bringing the light of your awareness to the entirety of your consciousness, even your subconsciousness. I think what disturbs a lot of people in the beginning is that when you're trying to do this and you're trying to be good and spiritual, so to speak, you're going to become aware that, one, you're woefully not in the driver's seat when it comes to a lot of your thoughts and your mental emotions. They're just happening. And it's like you're getting washed in with the tide and washed out with the tide. Another thing you're going to notice is that sometimes you're fully aware of, wow, I shouldn't think that and I shouldn't do that. And then you find yourself, well, I'm doing it anyways. And that can be disturbing because you're like, wow. For lack of a better word, you're going to have to become aware of the devil inside you winning a whole bunch. And just outright winning, where it's like, nope. And you going along with it, even knowing it's wrong. But I'll say, notice though that this was happening completely without your awareness at first. So just becoming aware of it is a great step. Because now that's how, without awareness, there'd be no resistance. And now you're aware of it. And so now you're understanding, wow, there is need of a resistance. You weren't aware of the need of any resistance before. And so it might be disheartening. It might feel like you're up against a lot. But take heart and understand that you're already taking a step in the right direction. And then now there comes the, I can't just let this go unchecked all the time. So a part of it actually will get better just from you being aware of it. So the stuff, you're going to be able to pick off a few things easily. Say, nah, we're not going to do that anymore. Or, you know what, I'm going to let that slide. And you know what, that's not worth it. There'll be things you can pick off right away. And then there'll be those things where it's like it seems you can't fight them. You're too set in your habits. You're too addicted to certain patterns of thought and behavior and emotions. Or they have a almost insidious ability to seduce you into going along with them, right? And it's easier just to go along with it than to kind of put up a fight against these, let's say, unwanted mental motions. And so you're going to have to get used to watching the devil win within you and that you're complicit in it a lot of the times. But then take heart, because you'll start to build resistance. And there's going to be a ongoing battle from this point onwards. And this battle can be weary because it can take a long time. It can take a lifetime. But it's better than letting it go unchecked. It's better than putting up no resistance at all. And then you may begin to realize that the part of you that's observing the devil, moi, so to speak, and the one who resists it, is free of that conflict.
Ooh.
And so you're not getting dragged down into the conflict as much anymore. And for some reason, that point of view helps you side with the resistor more often than not. I don't know why that is. It makes it easier to go with the relatively good choice. And so you're not sweating the battle back and forth as much anymore. And there's a bit more peace from which to view these things. So much so that when, say, something unwanted or bad, I'm speaking in relative terms here, you have to understand, comes up, you're no longer resisting it. You're stepping out of the conflict completely so that this bad thing is left shadowboxing. There's no one there to fight it. And it ends up, defeating itself, beating up itself, which is an esoteric principle often expressed in many martial arts, using the opponent's energy against them, right? Moving out of the way of the punch as opposed to standing up to block it. And so, in an inward sense, you're becoming this elusive martial arts master. So that with very little effort, you're staying and moving towards greater and greater depths of compassion and peace. And when you do reach a snafu, you have the experience and wisdom to understand that this too will pass. And all you have to do is stay the course and keep going. And this too will become one of those things that you can kung fu your way out of. And when this happens for long enough, you'll understand there's just one underlying principle that one should be following all the time for all the different, let's say, opponents and combatives that you might meet. If you just follow this one principle. And that one principle or versions of it will appear to you as insights or small satoris that make things more simple. It'll never make it more complicated. It'll make it more simple, and it will ring true. So that instead of doing 10 things, now you're doing 5 things. Instead of doing 5 things, now you're doing 2 things. Until eventually, you're only doing one thing, no matter what's arising. And it is said by some that eventually you'll be doing no thing. And that's liberation. That state in which one doesn't have to lift a finger.
As you're speaking, it's like you're speaking directly to me. And I'm sure those of you who are listening feel the same way. And it's interesting because you're speaking from a place of experience for yourself, right? But because it's the universal human experience, it applies to everyone. And it's interesting because I had this interaction with a family member last week, and he's having issues with women and whatever. And so I was talking to him about it, and we talk about it all the time, in fact. And the last time we spoke, he's like, "Are you a psychologist?" Right? And I was like, "No, of course not." Because he's like, "Because you're saying exactly what my psychologist said." And I was like, "Well, basically, because I've spent so much time looking inward and looking at how my mind works, right? It's easy to see what's happening in other people's lives, or it's easier, let's say, right? To see why people are thinking the way they are, why they're acting the way they are, why they're feeling the way they are, because it's a level of wisdom that you gain from your own experience. And that's why it rings so true with what you say. You know what I mean? Because, I had just explained earlier that, I've gone through these few months where I've done sort of no spiritual practice and basically allowed my sort of, devil mind, quote unquote, to sort of take over, even though, I see it happening. You know what I mean? And not sort of striving with that level of discipline that's required to grow as an individual. Yeah. Even just like, I guess, to grow as a person in society, but also grow as a spiritual person as well, or a spiritual being, let's say. And it always comes up when, I have these sort of bouts of, let's say, laziness, where I realize that, this is, my only life, let's say, right? And I've been given a chance to strive towards something that most people don't even come in contact with or can recognize, right? I have this opportunity. In fact, everyone has an opportunity to strive in some sort of way to better themselves. And whenever I have these bouts of laziness, I realize that I have this chance, and why aren't I working as hard as I can to improve on the person and being I am, right? It's so easy to become complacent, especially in our modern society where, survival is taken care of and you don't really need to strive anymore. Mm-hmm. And it was, plainly obvious by, when you were speaking there that I haven't been doing enough, you know what I mean, in my life to continue to advance my spiritual well-being and thus the people around me, you know what I mean? So it's really good, and I thank you for that. And it may not have been your intention, but it spoke directly to me.
I'm glad. And I'll say something on that, actually, is that for me, that's compassion. Compassion for me is saying, listen, I know, I've gone through that. In many ways, I still do, maybe in slightly different ways. But at every, say, level of spirituality that you'll go through relatively until you kind of move to the level of consciousness where you're not going through that particular back and forth, there is the back and forth. And having gone through that and still kind of going through that, compassion is saying, listen, brother, listen, sister, listen, fellow being. We're all in this. We're all going through it. So don't feel like it's just you. Don't feel like you're less worthy because you're feeling this way. Like, this is natural. A lot of people maybe want to start denying these things about themselves, but no, it's there. It happens. And no matter what, right? I'm with you. No matter what, I'm going to always encourage you to get back up one more time. I'm always going to encourage you to, take the next step. One person that's been influential to me once said to me, one day you're going to have to give up on giving up. And that's, in a nutshell, kind of why it's so important that we love each other and that we don't judge each other as much as possible, and we encourage each other, and we truly wish the best for each other in all the walks of our life, no matter who we're in contact with. Because it's not easy. It's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. And we're not all going from the same place, as we've discussed before. We're not all starting from the same situation. We're not all starting from the same amount of leisure or peace or love in life. And so anything you can do to help out another, to encourage another, you can't do it for them. Don't get that in your head that you're going to do it for another person. But anything you can do to encourage and show the options available and remind people, right? And to, from within yourself, to truly wish the best for people. That helps lighten your load. Because at the end of the day, we're all one. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that that's what compassion is that, understanding that your plight is everyone's plight, and then taking up, you could say, taking up the good fight, so to speak, and then having gone through it to turn around and say, you know what, like, yeah, this is the way it is, but keep going. Or, like I said to a friend recently who's going through a weight loss battle and posting pictures of their weight loss, right? It was obvious to me that they were kind of looking for some kind of gratification or some kind of, no, not gratification, validation.
Yeah.
Right? And I just said to the person, listen, I love you no matter what, and keep going. Both of those things. Both of those things. Right? And that's what I say to you and say to anyone listening. Is I love you no matter what, and keep going.
Yeah.
And to get up again. And stay on your meds. Right? Being meditation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what it is that we are, say, striving to see the truth of is something that's constantly changing form and will constantly switch and move this way and that and appear to you as many different things in order to distract you from the truth of yourself. So it's never going to stop. It can't stop. So I'm not going to stop either encouraging. Because it's insidious. And it's relentless. So my duty as a being in form, right, where I am right now, relatively speaking, will be to, for lack of a better word, vive la résistance, right? Vive la résistance. And that's compassion.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you'll find, people in your life who you can see that they're suffering immensely. Yeah. And that from your experience, that just by looking a certain way at your life, you can decrease the amount of suffering that you go through dramatically. Yeah. And, I've done it many times in my past where, a particular person in my life has been suffering for years. And I've tried so many times to try to end their suffering. Yeah. It's like trying to force an end to their suffering. But there's a lack of willingness to change, right? For whatever reason that might be. And that's where sort of what you just said, it comes into play, where a sense of compassion is, I see you and I love you no matter what. So despite the fact that you're suffering and I know there can be an end to your suffering, right? But you're not willing to listen, it's all good, right? That's just where you're at, right? And what you're able to do at this moment, and not get caught up in trying to always improve people, right? Because that's something that happens on the spiritual path quite often, is that once you sort of have some sort of level of understanding, you want to preach it to the world and say, this is it, I can end your suffering. Yeah. But the mind will take that over into a sense of righteousness or self-righteousness. And you'll just end up doing more harm than good by trying to force an idea of the end of suffering onto other people. The only thing that really you can do is to improve you, is to look inside you. And as K-Man said, you be that example and show people what's possible. And maybe that person that you really want to help may or may not see it, or, they might change dramatically, or they may change for a bit and then slide back into despair. But remember, it's not up to you, right? There's an infinite amount of factors that are playing on that person. You just stay as you and love them unconditionally.
Yeah, sometimes just being a steady consciousness, or a steady compassionate being, or steady in your principles that you live by, you can be much more of an impact on someone's life than ever passing on any spiritual truths to them.
Mm.
We have 5 senses, 6 really, if we include the heart, that we can perceive others with. And so sometimes people don't want to use their ears to perceive you. Sometimes they're using other ways of perceiving you. And so make sure you're, let's say, broadcasting on all the channels, because you never know how or who is listening. This kind of brings me to a point I wanted to bring up today. When I was talking to that family member and they were asking, how do I stop from slipping into these old ways and getting triggered and getting angry and upset and all these things. So consider, if you will, let's say like a case study. Okay. I'm walking down the street and someone spits on my shoe. And then I get upset and I kind of confront them about it. Their hackles rise up, and before we know it, we're in an altercation of some sorts. Another situation, I'm in a line somewhere at a bank maybe, and I've been waiting for a while, and someone cuts in front of the person in front of me. And I say, hey, what are you doing there? And they're trying to ignore me. And so I go out of my way to get this person's attention. And then they turn around and aren't happy with being confronted about it. And there's a bit of a back and forth, and before we know it, we're in an altercation. So let's look at these two situations. They're kind of different. They're kind of the same. But they appear to me as two different things. And that's how they're going to appear. But now, suppose I had no feelings at all. Suppose I had no feelings at all, no emotions. we'd never get past the part where the person buds in front of the person in front of me. We'd never get past the person spitting on my shoes, because they spit on my shoes and I keep walking. Or the person would cut in line and I'd keep waiting. So with all of my senses intact, I could see what's happening. I could hear it, right? My sense of touch is working. My sense of smell is working. My sense of taste is working. Even my ability to perceive what's happening is fine. Even my ability to talk to myself, oh, that person spit on my shoe, and just da-da-da-da. Or that person cut in line. Okay. Now, as soon as I add my emotional element to this, all of a sudden, now the story takes on a completely different dynamic. It becomes an actual story as opposed to just what's happening. From my point of view, I'm saying. So, all of a sudden now, if I add feeling, I have emotions. Now we have the stories that we started with, where there's ends in altercation, so to speak. It didn't have to, but let's just say for argument's sake. So, what I mean to point out to this, by this, is that no matter what's appearing before me through my other senses, what are the forces at play here? The forces at play are the motions or emotions in my heart. Because once we add that dimension, everything changes. And I pointed this out to say that no matter what's appearing before me, before my eyes and ears and other senses, they're actually quite meaningless to me without my emotions. So the actual forces happening outside of someone doing physical harm to me, right? The actual forces at play here have everything to do with my heart and its perceptions. My heart's perceptions of how I'm feeling about what's happening are the forces at play that move me. And without this, the whole thing's a movie I don't care about. And we've made this point before. But I'll make it again. No matter what is happening in my mind, through my eyes and my ears and my senses, so it's happening through the perceptions of my body, or it's happening inside what I consider my mind. Whatever is arising, whatever image or circumstance or happening or words are arising, they mean nothing without my emotions to me. So no matter what arises in your experience, understand that the forces at play that actually move you to be affected by what's happening have everything to do with your heart's ability to perceive emotion. These are the forces at play here. So, whatever it appears as, that's what it appears as. But the part that affects you has everything to do with your heart. So for all intents and purposes, you're a heart that can perceive stuff now. Take the heart away, you might as well not be there. Put the heart in there, all of a sudden, there I am. Take everything else away and I have a heart, hey, I'm still there. So no matter what experience and reality is arising and appearing to you as, understand that the forces at play have to do with your heart. And this was the point I made to my family member, is that stay at the level of awareness where you are not looking at what's arising. You're looking at how you're being affected in your heart by what's arising. Stay at that level of mindfulness or awareness. Don't even worry about watching my thoughts. Worry about how is my heart feeling about the thoughts I'm thinking.
Mm.
Stay at that level of awareness of your heart. So even if you're listening right now, we can do that right now. Just look at the level of awareness of your heart, okay? And I'm gonna take you through a story. Let's do this as a case study so we can get something out of this right here, right now. Okay? So I want you to think of your emotions, okay? I don't like, okay, it's going to appear to you, the story's going to appear to you as, let me take care of the story, okay? Let me take care of the appearance as it's going to appear, as a story in your mind. I want you to sit down and just feel what's happening in your heart. And don't even put words to it, just actually feel it like a physical force, okay? Your raw emotion. You don't need words to describe how you feel. You're just going to feel them. You don't even need thoughts to describe them to yourself. Are you not just feeling them? Are they not just there as feelings? You don't need to add anything to them in order to experience them. You can experience them as their essence, raw, as it is. So I want you to just take a few deep breaths and become aware. Close your eyes if you need to, and just feel your heart space. Nothing but your heart space, like you're floating in complete void. And all there is a heart that can feel. But it's not perceiving anything. Just take a few deep breaths and breathe out nice and slow and fall into that space. A void of perception, nothing being perceived, but there is potential to feel. Now into that void. Imagine you're walking down the street one day. Do-do-do-do-do. Without a care in the world. And as you're turning a corner, all of a sudden, before you get there, a woman comes running around the street, around the corner, towards you, saying, "Help, help, help." A second later, there's a man chasing her, and right there before you, he grabs her, throws her down to the ground, and begins punching her mercilessly. Be aware of your heart, not what's arising. How you feel? How do you feel? He's still hitting her. Why aren't you doing anything? Do something. Yes, he's much bigger and stronger than you are. What are you going to do? There's no one else around. Now, what if I were to tell you that outside of your field of vision, around the corner, where you couldn't see it, that woman had just run up and stabbed that man's baby in the carriage. He was out for a walk with his little baby. This woman walks up out of nowhere and stabs the baby and then starts running. And the man finally catches up to her. Now, unbeknownst to you, before all this happened, this woman's daughter was murdered. And the murderer walked free. And she was walking down the street one day and saw this murderer pushing his baby down the street in a stroller. And he looked at her and smiled because he knew who she was. And now I want you to go back to your original situation where you didn't know any of these things. You just saw a woman running around the corner, asking for help, being chased by this guy. But now that you know so much, you can't forget all of it. So what are you going to do in that original situation? What do you do? What do you say? Be aware of the forces at play. Stay centered on how you're feeling in this moment. And now, remember that none of this is actually happening. You don't have to make that decision. None of this ever happened. You're fine. You're sitting in a chair somewhere, listening to this voice. And this will never happen to you. And you'll never have to go through this. This never happened. Forget it. Forget it all. Just forget it. Let it go. There is no man. There is no woman. There is no corner. There is no walking down the street. Just go back to the perception of nothing in a void, and only a heart with the potential to feel, but not perceiving anything. And take a deep breath and breathe in that void. Like a heart floating in nothing, completely left alone. Notice how easy it was to be swept up in what I was saying, and how your heart got pulled along for the journey through its emotions. And how it might have felt good to just let it all go and realize that none of it was happening. Keep taking those deep breaths. Now imagine a grandmother holding her grandchild, newborn. And the grandchild has these big, beautiful blue eyes. And so does the grandmother. It's the only part of her that hasn't seemed to age. And they're sitting there on a park bench, across from where you're sitting on another park bench. And she's just staring into its eyes. And the baby is looking up at its grandmother, not aware of who she is, but somehow just feeling that they're safe in those arms, contented to stare up into eyes that reflect its own. And she begins to hum a lullaby. And the child's eyes slowly start to flutter and close, completely secure, swaddled and wrapped in the arms of a loving grandmother. And just as the baby's about to fall asleep, it shits itself. To which the grandmother giggles, but just lets it sleep for a little bit before she decides to change the diaper. This tender shared moment of absolute unconditional love. And you're just sitting there watching it all happen one day. And you're touched by what's happening. Now let that go. That's not happening. That never happened. There is no grandmother. There is no baby. There is no stinky diaper. There is no park bench, or even a park. There's just the perceptionless void and a heart with the potential to feel, but not perceiving anything. Take a deep breath now. And just let all perception go. And let your heart sink into that perceptionless void. Not perceiving anything again. You see how this is an even deeper peace than how it felt when it was on that park bench, perceiving that. There's a deeper peace here. And that peace is the heart, free of perception. As if one is in deep sleep, and yet aware. Let's come out of this now and open our eyes. And no matter what's around you, wherever you're sitting or wherever you are right now, I want you to remain mindful of your heart in that perceptionless void, even though all of a sudden there's images around you. There might be sounds. There might be smells and other things. But imagine you couldn't perceive any of it. That your heart is in a perceptionless void, no matter what's arising around you. And as you go through your day, remain aware of this balancing point, this deep peace. And anytime something comes to disturb it, remember the heart in the perceptionless void, no matter what's arising. Be very, very sensitive to any forces that would move it out of this place. And if something does move it there, then do the deep breaths, the mantras, the compassionate thinking necessary to bring it back to this place. And the more you are aware of this space and do whatever it is you need to keep it, you'll become stronger and stronger and stronger at moving yourself there and keeping yourself there. And you'll become more and more deeply rooted there as you move through your experience, no matter what's arising. If you make this commitment to this peace point within inside yourself, to make this your highest goal, no matter what's arising, and be mindful at the forces at play that would move it from this place, to build tools inwardly to bring yourself back there, to make this your only concern in life, to keep this place inside you, to keep your heart free. That peace. So that you bring all your physical and mental faculties into play in order for this to be maintained, for this to be kept, for this to be returned to, no matter what. Then the entirety of your experience becomes your spiritual practice. And in that sense, it will all be a joy, no matter what is arising. Be aware and stay at the level of understanding the forces at play. Stay on the level of your heart. Beyond mindfulness, it is heartfulness. And that heart in that place is the same as all hearts in all places, for it is the one heart. For when you are in this restful place, you are no different from anyone else who would join you there, because there is a perceptionless void with a heart for the potential to feel. And now think of all the beings you know and how all of them are just this. Little pieces of this same one peaceful, untouched heart, being given different windows into experience here and there, so that they are subject to the different forces at play, moving their hearts in all different directions through the arising of that little piece of heart's individual experience. And have compassion. Have compassion. Because they're all that one heart. Contemplate your return to this place, and contemplate their return to this place. Make that your guiding light, and you will do what needs to be done. You will say what needs to be said, and you will be what needs to be. Infinite compassion to anyone listening. I love you.
I love you too, buddy.